In our last video, we learned how to use functions to work with numeric data. Now we are going to learn how to use some of the functions SQL Server provides for working with dates and times. These functions are mainly used for extracting different parts of date time values and for performing operations on dates and times. So at the end of this video, combined with the knowledge from the previous videos on functions, you will have the knowledge needed to begin database design and implementation. Yes, we have come very far, and we are about to get into some advanced topics. If you have watched all of our videos, you have learned a lot of the SQL language so far. So let's dive in. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the SQL Server Series. This video is brought to you in reference to Joe Marach's SQL Server 2016 for developers. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of this book, then please follow the link in the description below. One of the functions you will frequently use is the getDate function. This gets the current local date and time from your system. Now the getUTCDate is similar, but it returns the universal time coordinate date, which is also known as the Greenwich Mean Time. And this is a different time format than most people are familiar with. So although you probably won't use the getUTCDate function often, it's useful if your system will operate in different time zones. Well, I mean, of course, the system that you're designing, right? So, the next three functions, system date time, system UTC date time, and system date time offset, work similarly to the first two functions. However, they return the date time 2 and date time offset types that were introduced in SQL Server 2008, which is a lower version of SQL. The one that we're currently operating on is SQL Server 2016. So these functions are going to return a more precise second value, and these are values that aren't going to be adjusted by daylight savings times or anything like that. The next five functions, day, month, year, date name, and date part, let you extract different parts of date value. We're going to cover some examples on these ones also. Now, the date add and date diff functions let you perform addition and subtraction operations on date time values, and these functions let you specify the date part to be added. The two date time offset and switch offset functions let you work with the date time offset data type. You can use the two date time offset function to add a time zone offset to a date time 2 value and return a date time offset value. And you can use the switch offset function to specify a new time zone offset value for a date time offset value. Now finally, the last three functions, EO month and date from parts, were introduced in SQL Server 2012. The EO month function gets the last day of the month for the specified date, and this can be very helpful, for determining, what days are valid for a given month. The date from parts function lets you create a date value for a given year, month, and day. And the isDate function returns a Boolean value that indicates whether an expression can be casted as a valid date time value. This function is useful for testing the validity of date time values before it is saved to a table. So we aren't going to cover examples on every single one of these, but we are going to look at the most commonly used ones in a day-to-day production environment. So if you want to learn how to use every single one, then I highly suggest you check out the book in the video description below for Joe Marach's SQL Server 2016 for developers. So the first function we're going to look at is the getDate function. And to do that, you specify the word getDate, and then you open up two parentheses, and that is your function. What this is going to do is return the current date. So I'm going to select getDate. I'm going to run this, and you see down here in our no column name, we have received our current date and time. Now if we do a getUTCDate, if I select getUTCDate, remember this is going to return a different date format that's like Greenwich Mean Time. So I'm going to run this, and I'm going to paste it up here. And you see this is a different time zone here for the Greenwich time zone. And So that's how get UTC date works. But you're most likely going to be using get date, if you're here in the United States, and you're around several other programmers that are also using get date, and your system that you're designing is based off of this time format. You're going to want to use this function in your SQL programs. The system date function is the next one. I can do select system date time. This is going to give me the date and time of our system, which is the same as our current date. And the next one's going to be system UTC date time. This is going to be the system UTC time here. You see, that's very similar to get UTC date. So right off the bat here, by looking at these four functions, we know that our current date is currently set to match our system date, and our system UTC date is set to match our get UTC date. So we know our system date is up to its current time. So there are some systems out there in production environments that you'll notice that are running on maybe an hour behind, or sometimes even a full day behind, just for certain processes. So you know when you do system date time, you're getting the date and time of the system and not the current date and time of the world. Now next, if we do select system date time offset, remember this is going to return a date time offset value for the current UTC date and time based on the system's clock and time zone setting with the time zone offsets. So if we run this is the value we get. So the first thing this is doing is getting our current UTC date and time based off of our system's clock date. So our system date up here was 03/12, which is March 12, 2018. So that's the time that it's going to use. Then the next thing that it's doing is it's giving you the 7 offset value for the current UTC time and date, and then it's ignoring any daylight savings time. And so since we're all current right now, you're not gonna see any hour jumps here in this value. So it's very important to understand what all of these mean. You may not use every single one. You'll probably find yourself using system date time and get date more than any of the other three. Now the next one I want to look at is the day function, and this is just going to return the day of a month as an integer. So if I were to pass in our current date and then run this, then I'd get the day of month from our current date, right? And an integer value, so that's 12. Our current day is March 12th, so it gave me 12 back. The next one is select month. This is going to give us the current month as an integer. So if I pass in the get date function to get my current date, then it's just going to extract the month, and now I get 3 as an integer value. Next, there's year. These are all important to know because you're going to be using a lot of these. If I pass in get date in the year function, here I should only get back the year, and that's what it gave me. It gave me 2018 back. Now the next one is going to be date partition. So I'm going to select date partition, and then the interval I'm going to pass in. When I want to partition from the date that I'm going to pass in, I want to partition my month, and then the date that I'm going to pass in is going to be my current date. And so what it's going to do is it's going to grab the month out of my current date because I'm doing a partition here, and my current date was, the month was March, which was 3, so it grabbed a 3 out of that. Now let's say I were to do date partition year as my interval and then pass in my date, then what is it going to give me? Well, then it's going to give me the year, right, which is 2018. So that's how the date partition function works. Next one is going to be date name. So if I do a select date name and then pass in month as my interval and then my date time offset, That's going to be my current date. Well then, let's see what it gives me. Well then it gives me the name of the month. So what it's doing, what date name basically did was the same thing as date partition when we specified the month as our interval. Instead of partitioning the month out of the current date of its current formats, it just named it and said the name is March. So if we were to select date name year, get date, what would we get? We would still get 2018 because there's only one way to name the year, right? So that's how that works. Now there's another way you could do date name. You could say select date name, and instead of writing out month all the way, you could just put an M there and then pass in your date value. In this case, I'm going to use my current date, and it'll still give me March. So that's a little shortcut you can use there. Now the EL month function, if I do select EL month, this is going to give you the last day of the month that you pass in here. So if I were to do EL month get date, run this, it takes me to the last day of the month, which is the 31st, 2018, March. Now there's also an optional parameter that can be passed into EL month to specify how many months you want to add to the function. So I could go EL month, and then I could pass in my current date, and then my optional parameter I could drop it in 2, and then this is going to add 2 months to that current month coming up to May, and then it's going to give me the last day of that month, which is May 31st. So that's how EL month works. Now the select date from parts function lets you create a date based off of a bunch of parts and values that you drop in. So let's drop in for our year, let's drop in 2018. For our month, let's just drop in February, and then for my dates I'm going to drop in 4, and then oops, I want to make sure I have that closed there. And then if I run that, date from parts has given me a perfectly formatted date based on a bunch of parts that I just dropped in. So that's how date from parts works. Let's look at it a different way. Let's say select date from parts, and then we just say 2016 4/3, and then we run that. Well, then it's also going to take that and it's going to format it into a perfect date for us as well, even without specifying the string literal single quotes around the numbers. It'll still create a date out of a bunch of parts that we drop in. So it's a pretty useful function. If you ever have a bunch of values that you just want to drop into this function and create a date out of it from a table, then that's what you'll use this for. Now the last function is isDate. I'll do a select isDate, and the isDate function returns a Boolean value that indicates whether or not the date that is passed in can be casted as a valid date time. So if I were to come in here and I were to drop in a date, let's say 2018 0930, and then I run this, we get back a value of 1. That means this can successfully be casted over to a date time value. Now let's run another one. Let's say select isDate, and then I drop in something like this here. I'll say 2016 0931. Now September ends at the 30th. It does not have a 31st day in this month for 2016 year. So if I run this, we're going to get back a 0, because this cannot be casted over as a date because September does not contain a 31st day in the month. So that's going to give you a 0. Let's take a look at one more. Let's select isDate, and then drop in some time. Let's put in 23, 59, 59. Remember, SQL reads date and time based on military time, so you're looking at 11:59 here. So if I run this, we get back a 1, which means this can successfully be casted over as a time value. Remember, its date is returning a Boolean value based on whether it can be casted over to a date or time, or a date and time. In this case, it meets the time, so it gave us back a 1. Whew. So that is all for this video. In our next video, we're going to take a look at some other functions that are very useful, and we're going to start looking at how to use the case statement and the is null statement. So thank you for watching. If you're interested in our next video, head on over to database-tutorials.com. If you like this video, then hit the like button. If you didn't like it, then hit that unlike button. If you're interested in receiving notifications when our next video is posted, then hit the subscribe button. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.